Tonight on Reporting Scotland, deaths by drug overdose are at an all-time high, up more than 20% on the previous year.
These are people, these are people's family, daughters, sons. They're not just statistics.
Also in the programme, train fares are set to increase as ScotRail puts up prices. Daft, that's the First Minister's verdict on Westminster's proposals for future customs deals between the EU and the UK. A narrow escape. Staff at Edinburgh Zoo raised safety fears after a panda was let back into its enclosure with a keeper still inside. And as Celtic prepare for a huge Champions League qualifier, will they have this man in the squad to help them reach the group stage? Good evening. Scotland's drug death rate has risen to record levels and is around 2.5 times that of the UK as a whole. Critics say it shows the Scottish Government's drugs policy isn't working. In 1997, there were 224 drugs deaths. A decade later, that had more than doubled. In 2015, the total had risen to more than 700. But now it's jumped by almost a quarter to 867. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Rival Alderson, has been studying the figures and meeting some of the people affected.
Graham had just been released from prison the day before when he got out, overdosed the following day.
Graham Bigley's death from a drugs overdose left 2 young children without a father. That's the effect a drugs death has on a family. There have been 4 drugs deaths in Julie Bigley's family in recent years. With a friend, she's now set up a service in Kilmarnock to provide support to others affected.
These are people, these are people's family, daughters, sons. They're not just statistics. And I believe the way forward, who best to support somebody that has an addiction or is wanting recovery is the families. But the families can't cope. They can't cope themselves.
It's a horrible thing. And I know a lot of friends that have died this year and last year.
Particularly at risk are older drug users. Almost 3/4 of those who died were aged 35 or over, addicted for longest, already failed in treatment, and now feeling services have run out of options.
I was to be put on a high level of methadone and to basically be left to my own devices. I didn't think I was going to be able to get clean.
It's just a case of, oh, you're still using, no places for you, no funding, no money. Put your meth up.
We're looking at the psychological needs and the client's physical health condition as well.
Drugs workers say they're struggling with government funding cuts. Here in North Edinburgh, that means not being able to deal with the reasons why people fell into drugs and continue to take them.
Unless you're dealing with the underlying elements, whether it be a mental health condition, a physical health condition, past abuse, and finding a way for the client to develop healthier coping strategies, they're very unlikely to give up the coping strategy that they've become accustomed to.
At a time when drug deaths are at record highs, we've seen services significantly affected by these cuts in funding, which have definitely reduced access to services at a time when we needed to improve access to this group of older drug users.
Drug addiction costs more than the rising death toll. Homelessness, crime and antisocial behaviour, as well as the impact on the NHS. Drug users cost around £100 million a year in emergency hospital admissions. The government's spent £600 million over 10 years on drug treatment, but it's now preparing to revamp its strategy called the Road to Recovery.
There's a lot that we can be proud of from the Road to Recovery, the impact that it has had right across the country, but that will be 10 years old next year. And so we need to take cognizance of the changing landscape of the way that services are delivered. We also need to take notice of the changing way in which people are taking drugs and the different drugs that are out there. So it's right that we refresh this.
But with Scottish drug death rates the highest in the EU, there are fears the situation won't improve soon.
It's just going to keep going up. It's just going to keep going up and keep going up and keep going up. There's no stopping it.
Rival Alderson, Reporting Scotland.
Most rail fares in Scotland are to go up in January. Peak fares will rise by 3.6%, while off-peak fares will rise by a little less at 2.6%. Well, our transport correspondent David Henderson is at Central Station in Glasgow tonight. David, how are these rises calculated?
Well, Jackie, the vast majority of rail fares are regulated by government, and that regulation is designed to ensure that passengers right across the UK don't pay too much to travel on routes where there's no real alternative to going by train. But because those ticket prices are pegged to inflation, they've risen in cost in recent years much faster than wages have risen.
It's a service many rely on to get around, but fares on ScotRail's trains are going up. For peak time travellers on ScotRail services and season ticket holders, the cost of a journey rises by 3.6%. For many off-peak journeys, the rise is a little less, 2.6%. So commuters will be hit hardest, and it's not long since delays on the network have tested their patience.
I don't think the stock is being upgraded properly. I live on a line where the stock's still ancient trains. Don't think it's often enough, frequent enough, so I think it's bad value for money at the moment.
Honestly, I'd probably say they're higher than they should be, especially with the delays you get on the trains.
If they're putting the prices up, then improve the service a bit, we make it a bit more reliable, less cancellations and delays and things like that.
Cut the fares, not the jobs.
At Waverley Station this morning, a protest from rail workers about rising fares.
Since 2010 there's been a 32% increase in train fares, whereas average wages have only increased by about 16%. And people just kind of keep on going like that, you know. People need to get to their work and it's a big chunk of their income.
Rail fares are rising across the UK. Ministers here insist they're protecting off-peak passengers.
They'll go up, for example, for off-peak fares less than RPI, and of course for peak fares no more than RPI, and that's because of Scottish Government action. So we know rail fare increases are of course unwelcome, and we understand that from passengers and commuters, but be rest assured the Scottish Government is taking action to make sure any increases are lower in Scotland than England and Wales.
But with average wages rising slower than the price of rail tickets, the real cost of most journeys keeps on climbing.
So in real terms, passengers right across the UK are paying more to travel by train now than they did 20 years ago. That's difficult for them, but on the other hand, it also means that government and taxpayers are paying less to subsidise rail travel than they used to. There's a balance to be struck. The number of rail passengers in Scotland has increased over recent years and looks set to increase in the years to come. But that may change if rail prices continue to rise. Jackie.
Thank you very much, David. The UK government's post-Brexit customs plans have been labelled daft and ridiculous by the First Minister. UK ministers say they're trying to help Scottish businesses with what they're calling an ambitious new arrangement. Nicola Sturgeon was speaking on a visit to Montrose, where the Scottish Cabinet was sitting, and from where our political correspondent Andrew Kerr reports.
Brexit is a bitter pill to swallow for the First Minister. Nicola Sturgeon was touring the GlaxoSmithKline plant in Montrose as the Brexit Secretary laid out his plans for a temporary customs union after Brexit and new arrangements.
Our primary aim is to look after the people of Scotland, the people of Wales, the people of Northern Ireland, and this is aimed to help them. So, for example, in Northern Ireland, we want to have an invisible border between the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And in Scotland, we want the people who are running businesses there to be able to have frictionless trade, and that's what it's about.
After the temporary customs union, which could last about 2 years, there are two scenarios. A new EU customs partnership with no customs border, or a highly streamlined customs arrangement, as close as we are to what we have at the moment. The First Minister was not impressed.
Why don't we just stay in the customs union? If they want to have something that, you know, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you know, it's a duck. And, you know, they seem to be going to great lengths to, you know, differentiate something that is pretty much identical to the customs union from the customs union. And that is what makes, I think, the UK government increasingly look a bit ridiculous.
The drugs at this pharmaceutical plant are shuttled all around Europe. This big multinational is looking for certainty when it comes to customs arrangements. And it's the same here at Montrose Rope and Sail. These covers will be on their way to the Netherlands next week. They've been around since 1789, so they've seen the ups and downs of Britain's relationship with Europe.
I think the community, the European community, hopefully will look at this kindly and we'll still be able to trade on a good format, a good footing.
Because for you, that's absolutely vital.
It's vital. It's vital for a trade. At the end of the day, that things are left as frictionless and free as possible.
So local and multinational companies received a bit more detail today about their future trading relationships. But there's still a great deal of uncertainty as to what Brexit actually means for Britain. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Montrose.
The Scottish Parliament is currently the subject of what's been described as a brute force cyber attack. A 54-year-old man has been arrested in connection with alleged offensive and threatening social media comments relating to Hibs manager Neil Lennon. Earlier, it emerged that Mr Lennon will face no police action following Saturday's win over Rangers at Ibrox. Complaints were made over his behaviour, but a Police Scotsman spokeswoman told the BBC officers had reviewed the events at the match and talks with the Procurator Fiscal established that no criminality took place. Therefore, no further action will be taken. A court has heard how a wedding planner at a Scottish castle went on the run after defrauding a large amount of cash from couples. Staff at Edinburgh Zoo have raised safety fears after a panda was let back into its enclosure with a keeper still inside. A local government councillor in the Western Isles owes £14,000 in unpaid council tax. A BBC Scotland investigation has revealed councillors across Scotland owe a total of £140,000. More than a third of the debt is owed by councillors in Glasgow. And our local government correspondent Jamie McIver joins us now from outside the city chambers. Jamie.
Well, Jackie, BBC Scotland asked councils across Scotland how much they were owed in unpaid council tax by councillors, and nationally the results were pretty significant. That total is enough to pay for the salaries of 4 teachers. Now, a total of 32 councillors across Scotland had council tax arrears, and in some cases the totals are so significant they would probably have taken several years to build up. Let's take a look at some of the figures. Well, here in Glasgow, 8 councillors owe a total of £50,000 between them. In North Lanarkshire, 4 councillors owe £20,000 in total between them. In Renfrewshire, it's 4 councillors who owe approximately £13,000, and in Aberdeenshire, again 4 councillors owe £20,000 in total. Now, we don't know who the individual councillors are, but certainly the law of averages does suggest that the amounts concerned would be fairly significant. And here's the biggest amount we can link clearly with one individual, and that's from the Western Isles, where that one councillor does owe £14,000 on 2 properties.
And Jamie, what are councils saying?
Well, Jackie, as far as we can establish, all the people concerned are now working to pay down these debts, and none are facing the active risk of prosecution. Indeed, Renfrewshire expects the total owed to be down to just £1,000 in the next few weeks. But certainly it's worth pointing out that some of the smaller debts could easily have been the result of personal financial problems by councillors. But the Councillors' Code of Conduct does specifically refer to council tax debts, and here's what it says. It says a councillor with more than 2 months of arrears can't take part in certain votes concerning the council tax. Now, one possible explanation for the larger debts is that they could be a legacy. Back in the 1990s, many councils had significant problems with non-payment of the council tax, very much seen as a follow-on from the campaigns to refuse to pay the poll tax earlier on. And of course, those debts could have been built up long before the people concerned were elected.
Jamie McIver, thank you. Baby boxes containing clothes, books and blankets are being delivered to new mothers across Scotland for the first time. The cardboard boxes include a mattress which can be used as an alternative to a crib. The Scottish Government hopes the boxes will help ensure every baby is given the best possible start in life. Baby boxes are already given out by some health authorities in other parts of the UK. Nicola Sturgeon has defended her predecessor Alex Salmond over a joke he made during his Edinburgh Fringe Festival show. The former First Minister has been accused of sexism over the innuendo which mentioned Miss Sturgeon, as well as Theresa May, the Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson and the US First Lady Melania Trump. Nick Herdley reports.
It's the ultimate test of comedy skill. The city where careers are made, where debutantes hope to win new fans and sell tickets. Not a problem one of this year's newcomers has had. Alex Salmond's full run has sold out, but not all his material is impressing critics. The former First Minister has been criticised for a sexual joke about female leaders, including Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon, a double entendre judged too risky for evening TV. And today his successor, a vocal champion of women's rights, gave her review.
I've worked with Alex Salmond very closely for, almost 30 years now, so he's not sexist. The second thing I would say, though, is occasionally Alex not always as funny as he thinks he is, and perhaps this is an example of a joke that perhaps belongs more in the Benny Hill era than it does in the modern era.
Some work to do then before the First Minister is ready to give a 5-star review. But what do punters at today's Alex Salmond Unleashed think?
I don't see anything sexist about that. I don't think it's a sexist joke. Maybe that's my generation.
I think it was a bad thing to say. It was just a mistake, I'm sure, but it was inappropriate.
I think it's the spirit of the Fringe, yeah.
But away from the Fringe in Glasgow, not so much understanding.
It's not really appropriate, is it? No, it's not funny. Sorry.
It's a Fringe and everything's tongue-in-cheek. He's trying to put down 3 women, basically, and it doesn't really do well when you do things like that. It's sexism at its worst.
Labour say Mr Salmond should apologise, and some women's groups think the comments were unacceptable. Proof that comedy isn't always easy, even for the most seasoned performers. Nick Eardley, reporting Scotland.
In sports news now, and Celtic is still trying to re-sign the Manchester City winger Patrick Roberts in time to face Astana in tomorrow's Champions League qualifier. Well, staying with football, Aberdeen could be forced to play European games in Glasgow or Edinburgh. Her family were forced to leave their home in Uganda nearly 50 years ago by the self-styled King of Scotland, Idi Amin.